Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to our October 2023 ACA Roundup of O'Neill Marketing. As always, we really appreciate everybody coming out and joining us this afternoon so that we can go over a handful of things before open enrollment gets in the full swing. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get it started here. As always, just kind of a brief overview of these webinars. We have been doing them every month since March now. We're just doing these webinars to cover industry news, important topics, things that agents have been asking us. This month is going to be a little bit different than some of the other months. So it's not going to be industry news, O'Neill marketing news into the third section. Since we're gearing up for open enrollment, we're really just going to jump in and really just focus on the things that agents have been asking us, either about open enrollment information, contracting, otherwise. So going to kind of skip over that, do it a little bit differently this month. But as always, we are going to send out the webinar slides to everyone who registered as soon as we're done here. And then if you have any questions during the presentation today, go ahead and pop them into the Q&A area on the left side of your screen. Then we'll answer all your questions later via email. So again, we're going to jump right in, just straight into the contracting updates. Gotten a ton of questions about this recently and just had some important information from our contracting team that we wanted to make sure that everyone's aware about. So to start, we mentioned this last month, the open enrollment carrier updates that we were making. We still have that page on our website, but we have now finalized and released our guide to the 2024 carrier updates. And so this is just one static flip book kind of guide that you can download or look at that just has the overview of, for the carriers, their expansions, some FAQs that we ask them and that they get asked a lot, and then just other important updates and information that the ACA carriers are able to give us. We have that for the top ACA carriers right now, but that guide is going to be continually updated as more information becomes available, and we'll be adding other carriers to that guide as well. So I've got a static link for the guide up top that's highlighted in the first bullet point. You can go there and just know that as we update the guide, that link there will continue to update as well. But then we're also going to have the guide available right on our website, o'neillmarketing.net. If you go to the homepage, scroll down just a little bit, you'll see a button that says Open Enrollment 2024 Updates. Click on that, and then it'll open a page, and that guide will be right at the top. So if you want to see it continually updated, you can go there and check it out, or you can go to the link right up top. There's a lot of really good information in the guide, especially for expansions and other, FAQs like how to pay premiums, all that good stuff that the carriers have given to us. So be sure to check it out, and especially too if there are any carriers that you're particularly interested in selling or are big in your area, would highly recommend you familiarize yourself with that. And then on that note, also wanted to shout out the carrier prep talks that we all just did. We had just a series of webinars with carriers to go over a lot of the same information, their expansions, updates, and other things that they needed agents to know. We have finished all of those webinars, and so any of the recordings and the resources that are available to us are going to be saved in the agent portal. Again, really good things to check out, especially if you have a carrier that you're going to be selling a lot of or is big in your area or that you're just really curious about. Go ahead and check them out there. You can go to your agent portal, go to the agent resources tab, the public folder, and then just the videos/webinars folder in there. And then you'll see all the carriers and you can peruse and look around and just look at the stuff that you're interested in. There's a lot of really good stuff in there. So if you haven't already checked it out or you weren't able to attend those webinars live, we'd highly recommend that you go and see those before open enrollment starts. And moving on to the more contracting stuff, we wanted to mention transfer blackout since that's a big thing going on right now. A handful of carriers are already entered blackout periods, but then there are a few more that have blackout periods that are coming up. So the big one is going to be Aetna. Aetna starts their transfer blackout period on November the 1st. And then Ascension or US Health and Life, they also have a blackout for transfers starting on the same date, November the 1st. So if you are looking to transfer your Aetna or your Ascension over to O'Neill Marketing, you'll want to get that in soon as possible and make sure that everything is submitted before the 1st of November. Same with all the other carriers. The transfer blackout just means that they won't process anything after that date, but as long as everything is submitted before the 1st of November, they will still process it, and as long as that will take, and then you'll be able to transfer it over. We wanted to mention Cigna in particular because that's one of the other larger carriers that we get questions about. So Cigna does not have an official transfer blackout period. They will continue to accept and process them throughout open enrollment. But that being said, Cigna contracting is very delayed, especially when it comes to transfers. So we'd still recommend that you still look to put those in as soon as possible if you haven't already. Cigna transfers take in at least 4 weeks, oftentimes more. So again, even though they do not have an official transfer blackout period, if you want to transfer Cigna, put them in as soon as possible because it will likely take at least 4 weeks before that transfer is finalized. And then just as a last reminder, when it comes to transfer blackouts, Ambetter, UHC, Molina, and Oscar have already entered transfer blackouts, and so they are not processing any more transfers until after open enrollment. So if you need to do that, unfortunately, you'll have to wait a little bit. All those other carriers still open, but we would recommend that you put them in as soon as humanly possible. And that kind of brings us to this next slide, which is just more generally about the contracting delays we've been seeing. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen this on your end, and trust me, we've seen a ton of it on our end, and there were just some general messages that our contracting team wanted to be passed along to you guys. So we are seeing, as I mentioned, significant delays in the carrier contracting, both for the transfers that we just mentioned, but also for brand new appointments. Some carriers still moving relatively quickly, but that being said, most carriers experience a lot of transfer or appointment requests right during OEP, really high volume of those right at this time of year. And so that does cause delays. It's nothing that we can do, it's nothing the carriers do. It's just that time of the year. So it's just something that we all need to be aware of. There were some carriers in particular that we did want to point out. So Cigna, as we mentioned on the last slide, we are seeing the most significant delays with Cigna. They are very backlogged when it comes to contracting. So contracting for Cigna, even for new appointments, is taking upwards of 5 weeks in many cases, sometimes even longer. That 5 weeks is honestly assuming that everything gets completed as soon as possible and everything flows normally. Other delays do tend to extend that process. So we are seeing pretty significant delays when it comes to Cigna. So with Cigna specifically, we would say make sure you request your appointments as soon as possible. And when you do request them, you should expect the process to take more time than usual. We would say probably at least 4 weeks you would want to budget in. And then going on to Ambetter, not quite as delayed as Cigna, but that being said, they are about 1 week behind on processing invites. And then once they send the invite to you and the form is submitted to Ambetter, once they have that form, the processing and confirmation is still taking about 2 to 3 weeks on average. So that would mean, again, assuming that that form is filled out and returned immediately, still expecting 3 to 4 weeks on average. Again, it really depends. It's not always as clear cut as that, but really it's just something that we need to be budgeting in when we're requesting appointments at this time of the year. And then the last carrier we wanted to mention were Blue Cross states that are not HCSC. If you're not aware, HCSC Blue Cross states are Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Montana, and Illinois. So if you're requesting Blue Cross in any of those other states, so North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Arizona, etc., their contracting process is lengthier than most carriers. So just be prepared for that longer process if you're requesting those Blue Cross states. This isn't so much about the processing time, more of just their contracting process in general. So if you are requesting Blue Cross in any states other than Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Montana, and Illinois, just be prepared for a little bit longer of a contracting process than you'll see with most other carriers. And then kind of the last point on this, as I've been saying, we are really recommending that when you request appointments, you should be budgeting at least 4 weeks before you get fully appointed. Some carriers are going to move quicker than that, especially if O'Neill Marketing is able to process and send out the contracting forms ourselves. But that being said, it is this time of year. It is right before open enrollment. I mean, open enrollment starts in like 6, 7 days. So there's a lot of contracting going on the carrier side. So it's really important that not only you request any appointments you need as soon as humanly possible, but also when you request that, you should really be expecting to not get appointed for 3 to 4 weeks. Again, some carriers are more, some carriers are less, but just really you want to budget that in. If you're requesting appointments today, especially if you're requesting Cigna, Oscar, one of those Blue Crosses, it might not be until after November the 1st that you're contracted. And on that note, once you have requested it, make sure you're completing all of your contracting forms as soon as you receive them, because that can hold up the process. And then also keep an eye out for any emails that you might get from contracting@oniomarketing.net, because we will be sending you instructions for what to complete, instructions on any forms you need to fill out, information that you'll need, or if our contracting team is going to be doing the contracting for you or completing parts of it, if we need any other information or anything from you, we're going to send you an email. And if you miss that and aren't able to get that information to us, that is also going to further delay the contracting process. So make sure you're keeping an eye out for contracting@oniomarketing.net emails. Check your spam, and if they're going to spam, make sure that you're whitelisting our domain. And then last point on this, this is really important, and we'll talk about it a little more later, but make sure that you don't write any policies with carriers until you're fully appointed with the carrier, not if you've requested it, but until you have completed and confirmed the contracting. Most carriers are not going to be backdating appointments. So if you write a policy a day, a week, 2 weeks before you are officially appointed, you probably will not earn the commissions on that policy, even if your appointment is finalized by the time the policy goes into effect. A lot of them do it by the submission date. So make sure when you are submitting a policy, you are fully appointed with that carrier. And the best way to check that is obviously going to be on your Onio Marketing Agent portal. You can just log in, go to the My Appointments tab, and you'll be able to see if it's pending or if you are completed and confirmed there. Now we're going to move on to just the second part of our webinar today. We're calling this just open enrollment essentials. And this is really just the questions that we've got a lot of so far, things that agents are asking of, and just things that we want to make sure you're all aware of as we go into November and open enrollment. So the first thing, probably gotten the most questions on this. It's a new big thing this year. This is really the first year these changes come into effect, and that is going to be CMS's new consent piece. So we just wanted to do a little recap of consent, lay out kind of what CMS is expecting from agents, and give you some resources for that. So we'll start with just the gathering of consent. This is just the normal getting consent from a client to access their information, to make changes to their application, all of that good stuff that I hope that you all are already familiar with by now. So when you come to gather consent, this should be done at the beginning of every conversation with a client. It should be pretty much the first thing you do once you get on the phone with them. The important note is that this should be gathered before you search the marketplace. If you're on Health Sherpa, you'll notice you have to click that little box that says that you've gotten consent. So before you do that, you'll need to make sure that you actually do have that consent gathered in either a form or a recorded phone call. It's important to note too that you will need to gather and store the consent even if you don't end up modifying the application or enrolling them in a plan. So even if you just search the marketplace and look at their stuff, you will still need to gather the consent from them. And on that note, you can still gather the consent in a number of ways. CMS isn't really mandating it. So you can do a recorded phone call, you can do a physical document with wet signatures, an electronically signed document. There are tons of other options that you can do, pretty much as long as your consent documentation meets the criteria that's been laid out by CMS, which we have on the next slide. As long as it meets all that criteria, then the form of the consent documentation is not really mandated. So if you have it on a phone call, as long as it's got those points, totally fine. And those points are, we have them listed out right here. It's the important stuff to know. So all the consumer consent documentation has to include, 1, a description of the scope, purpose, and duration of the consent. 2, the date that the consent was given. 3, the name of the consumer or their authorized representative. 4, the name of the agent, broker, web broker, or agency that's been granted the consent. And then 5, a process through which the consent can be rescinded. As long as you have all 5 of those, it can be a recorded phone call, electronic document. As long as you've got that and you've saved it per CMS, you should be good. And then once you have that consent, just a reminder, you do have to maintain the documentation for the minimum of 10 years laid out by CMS. And if CMS asks, you are going to be called upon to provide the consent documentation to them. And just a reminder, if you don't have something on your own end, Health Sherpa is offering a way that you can store your client consent documentation right there. You can put it in at the end of the application or add it in later on their client page, and then Health Sherpa will store it for you for the minimum of 10 years required by CMS. So if you don't have something set up already, might be a good idea to utilize that feature with Health Sherpa. And then there's a second part of the kind of new consent rules that we wanted to mention as well. That's the consumer eligibility review. So essentially, what this is CMS is also requiring that agents document that the eligibility application information has been reviewed by and confirmed to be accurate by the consumer prior to submitting the application. So this is a separate event than you getting the consent. You have to get their consent to access their information and change their application and all that good stuff. But then once you've completed the application, before you submit it, CMS also wants you to get something from them so that they're aware of the attestations that you read out and they're acknowledging that everything on the application is correct. So similar to the consent piece, CMS has also laid out the things that are required from this. Little more straightforward. That's just the date that the information was reviewed, name of the consumer and their representative, explanation of the attestations at the end of the eligibility application. Those are the things that you'll read out at the end of Health Sherpa that you're supposed to read out to every client. And then the last is just the name of the agent, broker, web broker. So that is separate from the consumer consent, and that's important to know. These two requirements, the consumer consent and the consumer review and confirmation of the application information, they can be completed on the same form. CMS has said, just provided that it is evident that they were completed at different times, before and after the application, which I think makes sense if you really think about it. You need the consent to get into the application and to access the client's information, but then you need another thing that's done after they have submitted the application or after they put the information into the application, rather. That just has them saying that everything in there is correct. So if you're doing an electronically signed document, you'll just need to have a way that there are two separate timestamps so that you can show that you got consent to access before you went in and searched the marketplace, and that they have also attested that the information on the application is true after it's been filled out, but before it's been submitted. Alternatively, if you are recording your phone calls, which we'll get into in a second, we would highly recommend that everyone do. If you are recording your phone calls, that should just work out in the natural scope of the conversation, right? Because if you're recording your phone calls, you get on the phone with them, you get the consent piece out of the way, they give you permission to access their information, you go through the entire application, get all their information, all of that good fun stuff. And then at the end, if you're familiar with HealthStrip applications, you'll know right before the sign and submit, there are those 2 pages of attestations you're supposed to read out to the consumer. So if you're recording your phone calls and you're reading out those things, as long as you get that and you have them confirm, that part of the recording will count as the eligibility review. So it's just important to know that these are two separate things. We'll get into a second. We would still highly recommend everyone record all of their phone calls, but if you are only doing this via electronically signed document, just know that you'll have to have those two separate timestamps. And we've got just some resources for you guys here. A lot of stuff we've already shared, but I think it's super important. If you haven't looked over this, please do so before open enrollment starts. We've got the model consent form that CMS provided that you can base any forms or scripts off of. We got CMS's consent and application review FAQs that addresses a lot of these questions and really gets into the nitty gritty of it with the top questions that agents have asked. We've got the marketplace compliance for agents, brokers slides. That's a presentation that CMS put on back in September that just goes over a lot of the new rules and things that they need from agents. And then we also have Health Sherpa's active consent article that includes some consent forms from Health Sherpa and some other information, and it gets into also what Health Sherpa is doing on that side, some of their features that might help you out in that regards. So those are all really good resources to look at. If you haven't already, I would highly recommend when you get these slides, go ahead and check those out and try to work that into your process. And then, as we get into it, if you need clarification on the rules or you have a unique case that you're not really sure about, CMS has said that you should go ahead and just email their agent broker help desk. I've got the email address right on there. I'm not going to read it out because it's really long. But if you need some clarification, you're really unsure, or you have a unique case, go ahead and reach out to them and they will offer some support for you. And that way it's coming directly from CMS. And so you know whatever they say is coming straight from the source. Our next really essential thing, again, we touched on it earlier, but I cannot overstate how truly important this is. Before you submit a policy, make sure that you are fully appointed with that carrier. It's so crucial that you ensure that the NPN that you use for the policy is appointed before submitting the application. Again, as we mentioned, most carriers will not be backdating any appointment. So if you write a policy before the appointment is finalized, very, very, very likely that the carrier will not pay out commissions on the policy. This is one of those things that I think in abstract seems pretty simple and straightforward, but every single year we see it happen. We have policies where, an agent writes it maybe a week or two before their appointment's finalized. By the time January 1st comes around, they are appointed, but then when it time comes for paying commissions, realize we're missing a commission. And when we reach out to the carrier, that is what they tell us. So, it seems simple, but it happens every single year. So I cannot recommend enough before you submit it, make sure you are appointed. Best way to stay up to date with your appointment statuses is again going to be through the agent portal. Go ahead, log in agents.oniomarketing.net. Go to the My Appointments tab, and you can see all the information there. If you see that the appointment is listed as pending, hold off. Wait until it is completed and confirmed before you write the policies under that NPN. If you have any questions about the appointment status or you're unsure about something, go ahead and reach out to Contracting and O'Neill Marketing for confirmation questions, anything like that. But the big message is if it's pending, hold off for a second. And then also, too, if you are using an upline NPN or using the NPN override, make sure that you are up to date with their active appointments. Do not submit policies unless you are 100% sure that the NPN used is appointed with the carrier. Overall, it is better to hold off a little bit on submitting and be 100% sure than to go ahead and submit now and potentially lose out on the commissions. You'll regret it later, so always best to be positive. Now it kind of brings us back around. We mentioned it before. We mention it to people all the time, but this is another thing that cannot be overstated enough. Everyone should be recording their calls. It's not mandated by CMS, at least at this point. But that being said, it really is advisable that everybody records all of the phone calls you have with clients to ensure that you have consent and you have records of the conversation that you had with clients. Because if you ever need to prove that you spoke with the consumer or prove what was spoken of, or maybe even provide some consent records to CMS, the recorded calls will be your friend and they will be very important to have at that point. One caveat that I do want to mention, call recording in and of itself does not take the place of official consent documentation. It's just an important addition that can protect you from potential complaints. So what I mean by that is if you are just recording your calls and you're not doing anything of consent, that doesn't count. You can use a recorded call as consent documentation, again, as long as it includes the 5 required items that we mentioned just a few slides ago. So if you are recording your calls and you have a script that has all that and you're going through that at the beginning and you're doing the application confirmation at the end, you are perfectly golden. But even if you are using a consent documentation form so that you can have that in writing, we would still highly recommend that everybody look into call recording and record all of your calls. We really can't overstate it enough. It's super important and it will protect you in the long run. One other thing that we do want to mention, though, this is something we've said before, but we want to restate it here. If you are going to use O'Neill Marketing NPN override, so if you're going to use one of our NPNs on a policy, you must record your calls, and we need that just in case of a consumer complaint. Because if the complaint comes in and it's a policy that you used our NPN on, we are going to turn to you to provide the call recording, provide the consent, and all of that. So if you use our NPN overrides, we're asking that you do record all of your calls. We're saying that you must do it. But even if you're not, even if you're writing everything under your own NPN or the NPN of your upline, we would still recommend that you record the calls. It is really important, and it will come back to help you if it ever is needed. We want to touch briefly on just renewals on Health Sherpa. We've gotten a few questions about this as well, so we kind of wanted to lay everything out here, just the paths that Health Sherpa has to renew your policies for 2024. Health Sherpa this year has 3 separate paths for how you can renew, so we're going to go over those one by one. The first one is the bulk agent renewal email. So essentially what this is you can trigger a renewal email from your client's page or your dashboard that'll include a member-specific link so that they can enroll or update their information. If you want more info on it, there's an article link right there. But essentially the process is you'll just go to your dashboard and client's page, and then you'll need to filter or select the clients from your dashboard. Just know by default, these emails will be sent out to every single client who has not renewed. So if you need to be a little bit more selective, just make sure that you filter that list down first. Once you got it filtered, you'll see that button. You can see at the bottom of the slide here. the button that will say renewal email. Just know that option probably is not available for you guys right now. Hellsherpa said it won't be available until window shopping begins, which will be hopefully in the next few days or the next week. But just know that will pop up before open enrollment starts. So once you see that, fill to your clients, click the renewal email button, and then you can customize and send out those emails. And if you want a little more information on how you can customize it and some of the other cool things you can actually do with these emails, go ahead and read the article that's linked right there. Hellsherpa goes into a lot more detail than I will do right here. But if you want to customize it a little bit more, make it your own, check out that article, please. And just, before we move on, we would say this agent renewal email, this is probably the best way to go if you need to invite multiple clients, or you need to invite all of your clients to renew on their own, or if you just want to send out a reminder to them. This is really good for sending out bulk stuff to your Hellsherpa clients. And then the next path for renewal on Hellsherpa, pretty straightforward. I think you could have seen this coming, and that's just going to be to search the marketplace. So if you're not aware, in the top right corner of Hellsherpa, you're able to search the marketplace. There's just that button highlighted right there. You can type in first name, last name, date of birth, and state, and then you'll be able to see existing applications or information for the clients. So once you search that, if there is no existing application, you can still go ahead and create a new one. It's good to know because if the consumer has an existing application, you'll be able to just update that information. It'll save you a little time. And you can just change anything that needs to be changed and then just move right on to plan selection without having to redo the entire thing. But again, just want to mention one last time, if you search the marketplace, make sure to get consent first. It's going to be super important. CMS is probably going to start asking for it, so just make sure you're getting consent right away. So searching the marketplace, this is going to be the best method if you have obviously just a brand new client coming in off the street. You've never spoken with them before. You'll have to search the marketplace to find them, and this is the way that you'll want to go for that. And then the last of the renewal options for Hellsherpa is the renewal right on the client's profile page. So if you go to your dashboard and you click into any client's page, again, starting closer to open enrollment, you'll see in the top right, there will be a button that says renew or renew plan. And so you can see there'll be a little drop down button too. So you can just choose whether you want to shop first, which will be the default, or you can start with the application by selecting the drop-down arrow. You can see that again right here at the bottom of the screen. So this is going to be the best option. Obviously, if you have an existing client that's already in your Hellsherpa profile that wants to just update or renew, you can just click right into their page, click on renew plan. If you just click on that, you'll shop for the plan first, and then you'll update the application. Or if you want to start with the app, you can click that little drop-down arrow, update the information first, and then shop for a plan. Just some points on that. So as we mentioned before, renewal applications will be pre-filled with existing information if that is available. So when you're going through the renewal apps, make sure that you're checking for accuracy and update any information that's changed over the last year. That's going to be especially important for the income. Obviously, that determines their subsidy level. So don't just blast through the application. Make sure that you confirm that the information is still accurate. And if there is anything that needs to be changed, make sure you're updating that before you move on. Another point to note is that most clients are going to have their crosswalked plan already selected. So the crosswalk plan, I have that in quotes here because there are a few different names. Some people call it the crosswalk plan. Some people call it the mapped out plan. Essentially, this is the plan that they are slated to auto renew to if they have that selected. So if they do have auto renew on, which most people do, the clients will have their crosswalk plan already selected when they go to the plan selection page. So if they want to choose a separate plan, they're going to have to make sure that they select to look for other options. Either they or the agent will. If the plan is already put in there by default, it just means that it's slated to auto renew to that. But on the flip side, if a customer just wants to enroll in the crosswalk plan, they'll just need to make sure that they update their application information, and then that plan will automatically be selected, and they'll be good to go and save everybody a little bit of time there. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, as I'm sure, again, a lot of you already know, clients are receiving or will start to receive emails from Hellsherpa and from CMS that'll have details about that crosswalk plan that they're slated to auto renew to. And those emails are going to inform them about any changes in the premium and the deductible, carrier, max out of pocket, anything like that. So hopefully the clients will already have at least some sort of idea of what their plan is being renewed to, or if they're going to have to change plans. And so hopefully they'll know, but just know most people will already have that slated out. And if they want to look at other options, you'll need to make sure that you're offering that to them. All right, and then the last thing that we wanted to mention about the OEP Essentials, and this is another thing that we see every year. We've been really trying to push that, just to really make sure that you're checking periodically to make sure that you are remaining the agent of record for these plans. Most people have experienced it before. You'll write a policy, you'll check back later, and it turns out another agent has rewritten that and become in the AOR. Sometimes they talk with the client, sometimes they don't. So it's something that you'll want to keep an eye out for. And there are a few ways to check this. I'm going to go over some of the Health Sherpa ways first, and then on the next slide, I'm going to say a way that's more accurate but a little more involved. So if you're just on Health Sherpa or using Health Sherpa and you want to check to make sure you're still the agent of record, obviously the easiest thing to do is just to click into the client's page and then look for the AOR name. If you look at the agent of record and it says other party or a name that you don't recognize, that means that it's no longer you and it's probably been changed. And if that's the case, you'll want to contact the client, see if they've spoken to anyone else, or see if it was, unfortunately, maybe a policy that was stolen. Something to keep an eye on. But of course, if you have a lot of clients, it's very time consuming to click into every single client page. So in that case, a way to maybe narrow this down is if you pull an export of your entire book of business on Health Sherpa, you can look at columns AI and HA. Those columns are titled NPN used and NPN reason, respectively. So you look at those two columns, and then you want to look for one of the following. So one red flag would be, obviously, if the NPN reason says other party, that's a very good indication that the AOR has changed. But another thing is if you see that both of those columns, NPN used and NPN reason, are both blank, that also could be an indication that the agent of record has changed. So pull your export, look for one or both of those, and then if you see that, then I would say go back to the number one there, and then just click into those clients on Health Sherpa and double check the agent of record. Again, that's just a way to filter down. At the end of the day, it's still a good idea to click into that Health Sherpa client page just to double check, because that will have more information there. And then the third thing I did want to mention, this is kind of a new development. Health Sherpa says they will begin to email agents when the AOR may have changed. This is a new program that they're kind of starting this open enrollment. So we don't exactly know what it's going to look like, how it's going to work, what their criteria are, etc. But that is something that they're started. So I think that that will actually be a very valuable resource for agents that hopefully will notify you before this. Obviously, we would still recommend that everybody manually check themselves because that's the best way to go about it. But that being said, once Health Sherpa starts doing this, you might get emails about it. So just be sure to look out for emails from Health Sherpa and address them when you get them. And as I mentioned a second ago, while checking Health Sherpa is typically going to be the easiest way to make sure that you're the agent of record, it's not actually always the most accurate. There are some situations where you won't be able to see the entire story on Health Sherpa, and it might be a little bit misleading or confusing or just not very clear cut. So while checking Health Sherpa in the ways that we just mentioned is going to be the quickest and easiest way to make sure that you remain the agent of record, the most accurate way actually to ensure that you're still the agent of record for all the policies you submitted is going to be actually through the carrier portals. So what you'll want to do for this, again, this is a longer and more involved process. You can log into each carrier portal account, and then you can either just have it open on the screen with your book of business, or maybe even better, just get an export of the book of business so you can have it in a file, and then compare the carrier portal data to your Health Sherpa enrollments to make sure that all the submitted policies from Health Sherpa are present in your carrier portal. Know that a lot of times it'll take maybe 5 to 10 days for policies to get submitted and make it all the way to your carrier portal. With that being said, if it's been a few weeks and you submitted a Health Sherpa policy and it's not been canceled and it's not showing up in your carrier portal, that's that could be a red flag. It could mean that either the AOR has changed or there's something wrong with the policy, or it could even just simply mean that the carrier doesn't have any data about it. So if you are missing policies in the carrier portal that you know are submitted and active, go ahead and just reach out to the carrier to make sure that the policy is in the system with you as the agent of record. It's one of those things that if you're checking this relatively frequently, It gets easier and easier as you do it. And as with most of these things, it's always better to be proactive about it. Because if you notice this before any commissions come, you can get it rectified and then everything should work as normal. Whereas, on the flip side, what usually happens is you don't notice this until after the commissions are missing, in which case you've already, maybe lost a little bit of time, or if there's something more serious, you might have even lost a few months of commission. So we'd recommend that you're checking this periodically throughout open enrollment and beyond. Health Sherpa is a good resource for that, but if you really want to get down into it and be even more confident about it, this is the best way to do it, using both your Health Sherpa data and your carrier portal data. A little bit more time consuming, definitely a bit more involved, but it is certainly the most consistently accurate way to make sure that all of your submitted policies are active with you as the AOR and they are in the carrier system and going to get commissions for them. So again, something that we would really recommend check. I would say overall, the things that I would want every agent to know going into the next few weeks into open enrollment are make sure you're getting consent right off the bat. Make sure you're recording all of your phone calls. Make sure you know that you are appointed, or the NPN you're using is appointed with a carrier before you submit a policy. And then last, but certainly not least, periodically check to make sure that you are the agent of record and that everything is working smoothly. And if you can get all that out of the way, it's really just up to talking with clients and getting them enrolled in policies, and you should do pretty well. So that is going to bring us to the end of our October roundup. As always, everybody, we really appreciate you all taking a little bit of time out of your day to come and do this. I know open enrollment's getting close. I know we're getting pretty busy. So thanks for coming out, guys. Thanks for tuning in. As always, if you have any questions or you need anything, agent support, phone number, and email are right on the screen. Feel free to reach out. We are always here and we are always happy to help. So take care, you guys. Have a fantastic rest of your afternoon and have a great open enrollment.